The desert heat was unbearable, even at 4 in the morning. Staff Sergeant Marcus Chen wiped the sweat from his brow as he adjusted his scope for the 100th time. 3 days they had been lying in this godforsaken valley, watching the compound through their high-powered rifles. 3 days of watching, waiting, and failing. "Target acquired," whispered Petty Officer Jake Morrison into his radio. His voice carried the frustration that had been building since they arrived. "Same result as yesterday. No clear shot." The compound sat like a fortress on the hillside, surrounded by innocent civilians who had no idea they were being used as human shields. Inside that building was Khalil Nasir, one of the most wanted terrorists in the region. Intelligence suggested he was planning something big, something that would cost American lives if they didn't stop him soon. Commander Sarah Walsh crouched behind them, studying the compound through her binoculars. She had led dozens of successful operations, but this one was different. Every angle they tried was blocked. Every position they took was compromised by civilian presence. The rules of engagement were clear: no civilian casualties. "Sir, we have movement," Chen reported. A black SUV had pulled up to the compound's main entrance. Several armed men emerged, their weapons clearly visible even from their distant position. Morrison shifted his position slightly, trying to get a better angle. "I can see Nasir through the window, but there's a family with children directly in my line of fire. Kids can't be more than 6 or 7 years old." The team had been hand-picked for this mission. Chen was one of the best marksmen in the Navy SEALs, with over 40 confirmed kills. Morrison had served 3 tours in Afghanistan and was known for his ability to make impossible shots. Walsh had never failed a mission in her 12-year career. But this target seemed untouchable. "Command, this is Bravo Team," Walsh spoke into her satellite phone. "We still don't have a clean shot. Target is using civilian shields effectively." The voice that came back was tense. "Bravo Team, we're running out of time. Intelligence suggests the attack will happen within 48 hours. Whatever he's planning, it's big." Chen lowered his rifle and looked at his commander. "Ma'am, we've tried every position in this valley. Unless those civilians move, we're not getting this guy." Walsh knew he was right. They had mapped every possible shooting position within a 2-mile radius. The compound's location was perfect for defense, surrounded by a small village where families lived their daily lives, unaware of the danger in their midst. "There has to be another way," she muttered, studying her tactical map again. Morrison pointed to a ridge on the far side of the valley. "What about that position?" "It's further out, but maybe." "Too far," Chen shook his head. "That's nearly 1,800 meters. Even with perfect conditions, that's beyond our effective range for a guaranteed kill shot." The sun was beginning to rise, forcing them to pack up their equipment once again. For 3 days, they had moved from position to position, hoping to find the perfect angle. Each time, civilian shields made the shot impossible. As they prepared to move to their next observation point, Walsh received another call from command. The news wasn't good. "Bravo Team, we've intercepted communications. The attack has been moved up. You now have less than 24 hours." The pressure was mounting. The intelligence community had spent months tracking Nasir to this location. If he escaped again, hundreds of innocent people might die in whatever attack he was planning. "Sir, what if we tried a ground assault?" Morrison suggested as they moved through the rocky terrain. Walsh considered it. "Negative. Too many hostiles, and we'd still risk civilian casualties. This has to be clean." They spent the next several hours setting up in a new location, hoping the angle would be better. Chen carefully assembled his rifle while Morrison used a rangefinder to calculate distances and wind patterns. "Same problem," Chen reported after studying the compound through his scope. "I can see the target, but there's a mother with her baby standing right next to the window." The frustration was evident in his voice. These were men trained to complete impossible missions, and yet they were being defeated by their own rules of engagement. Walsh was about to call for extraction when something caught her attention. A figure was moving along the ridge on the opposite side of the valley, the same ridge Morrison had pointed out earlier as being too far for an effective shot. "Do you see that?" she asked, handing Morrison her binoculars. Morrison studied the distant figure. "Someone's up there." "Civilian, maybe? At 1,800 meters from the target?" Chen raised an eyebrow. "That's not a casual hiker." They watched as the figure settled into a position among the rocks. Whoever it was had moved with the kind of precision that suggested military training. "Command, this is Bravo Team," Walsh spoke into a radio. "Do we have any other assets in the area?" The response was immediate. "Negative, Bravo Team. You are the only authorized personnel in that sector." Walsh felt a chill run down her spine. If there was someone else in the area, and they weren't military, that could mean the mission was compromised. Or worse, it could mean Nazir had backup they didn't know about. "We need to investigate," she decided. "Pack up. We're moving to that ridge." The climb would take them most of the day, and time was running short. But Walsh couldn't shake the feeling that whoever was on that ridge was important to their mission. As they began their trek across the valley, staying low and using the terrain for cover, none of them could have imagined that the mysterious figure on the ridge was about to change everything. The SEAL team had failed to complete their mission despite their training, their equipment, and their expertise. But sometimes, when conventional forces reach their limits, it takes someone operating outside the system to get the job done. Someone who doesn't play by the same rules. Someone with nothing left to lose. The climb to the ridge took Commander Walsh and her team 6 grueling hours. The rocky terrain was treacherous, and they had to move carefully to avoid being spotted by anyone watching from the compound below. By the time they reached the position where they had seen the mysterious figure, the sun was beginning to set. What they found surprised them. The position was perfectly prepared, a shallow depression in the rocks that provided natural cover, with clear lines of sight to multiple targets in the valley below. Small stones had been carefully arranged to create a stable shooting platform. Empty water bottles were buried in the sand nearby, suggesting someone had been here for days. "Professional work," Chen observed, running his hand along the prepared shooting position. "Whoever was here knew what they were doing." Morrison was studying the ground through his scope. "Look at this distance marker carved into the rock. 1,843 meters to the compound. Someone measured this down to the meter." Walsh examined the position more carefully. The attention to detail was remarkable. Wind flags made from strips of cloth were positioned at regular intervals down the slope to help judge wind patterns. A small notebook was wedged under a rock, its pages filled with handwritten calculations about wind speed, temperature, and bullet drop. "This is beyond professional," she muttered. "This is master-level fieldcraft." As if summoned by her words, a voice spoke from behind them. "You're in my spot." All 3 SEALs spun around, weapons ready, but the man who had spoken was already covering them with an old but well-maintained rifle. He appeared to be in his 50s, with gray hair and weathered skin that spoke of years spent in harsh environments. His clothes were civilian, but his posture and the way he held his weapon screamed military training. "Easy," the man said calmly. "If I wanted you dead, you would be. Lower your weapons." Walsh kept her rifle trained on him. "Identify yourself." "The name's David Torres. Sergeant Major, retired. Used to be 75th Rangers, back when that meant something." Morrison whispered urgently to Walsh. "Ma'am, David Torres was a legend in the Rangers. Longest confirmed kill in military history until it was classified. Guy disappeared after his unit was wiped out in Afghanistan 8 years ago." Torres heard him. "Your intel is good, son. Though disappeared isn't quite right. I prefer to think of it as going independent." Walsh slowly lowered her weapon, and her team followed suit. "What are you doing here, Sergeant Major?" "Same thing you are, I imagine. Trying to put a bullet in Khalil Nazir." Torres shouldered his rifle and moved to his prepared position. "Difference is, I'm actually going to succeed." "That's an impossible shot from here," Chen protested. Even with perfect conditions, 1800 meters is beyond effective range. Torres smiled grimly. Son, I've been making impossible shots since before you knew which end of a rifle to hold. And I've been watching that compound for 5 days, learning every pattern, every routine. He pulled out a worn photograph from his jacket pocket. The image showed a young soldier in dress uniform standing next to a woman and 2 small children. My son, Michael Torres. 2nd Lieutenant, 82nd Airborne. Killed in a bombing in Kabul 2 years ago. Intelligence says the bomb was built with materials provided by Nasir's network. Walsh understood immediately. This wasn't about military objectives or rules of engagement. This was personal. Sergeant Major, we're operating under strict ROE. No civilian casualties. I know about your rules, Commander. Been watching you for 3 days, trying the same positions, getting the same results. Torres settled behind his rifle and began adjusting his scope. But I don't answer to your command structure anymore. Morrison moved closer to get a better look at Torres's weapon. What he saw made him whistle softly. The rifle was a custom-built piece, clearly modified by someone who understood both ballistics and engineering. The barrel was longer than standard, the stock had been adjusted for maximum stability, and the scope was a piece of equipment Morrison had never seen before. Where did you get that scope? Morrison asked. Built it myself. Spent 2 years working with a gunsmith in Montana, designing something that could handle extreme long-range shots in difficult conditions. This beauty can compensate for wind, temperature, even the rotation of the Earth. Chen was studying the compound through his own scope. Sir, even if you can make the shot, the target is still surrounded by civilians. Those children haven't moved from that courtyard all day. Torres was quiet for a moment, continuing his preparations. You think I don't see them? You think I don't care? He paused his work and looked directly at the SEAL team. I spent 26 years in the Army. 26 years following orders, protecting civilians, doing things the right way. You know what it got me? A dead son and a government that forgot I existed the moment I retired. Walsh could hear the pain in his voice, but also something else, a cold determination that made her uneasy. Those civilians down there, Torres continued, they're not safe as long as Nasir is alive. Whatever he's planning will kill a lot more people than live in that village. Sometimes you have to choose between bad and worse. Torres returned to his rifle and began making final adjustments. I've been tracking wind patterns for 5 days. In about 30 minutes, the wind will shift from the southeast to due south. For exactly 7 minutes, there will be a window where atmospheric conditions are perfect. Morrison checked his own wind instruments. Torres was right, the wind patterns had been remarkably consistent, and the shift he described had happened at the same time for the past 3 days. Even so, Walsh insisted, you can't guarantee civilian safety from this range. Torres looked up from his scope. Commander, I've made this shot 100 times in the past 5 days. Not with bullets, with calculations. I know exactly where that round will go, down to the millimeter. He pointed to a series of small mirrors positioned on rocks between their position and the compound. See those? They're angled to show me exactly how light travels from here to there. I've accounted for every variable, humidity, temperature gradients, even the thermal updrafts from the valley floor. Chen was beginning to understand the scope of Torres's preparation. This wasn't just a sniper taking a difficult shot. This was an engineer solving a complex mathematical problem. You've been planning this for months, Walsh realized. Longer. I've been tracking Nasir for over a year, learning his habits, his security protocols. I knew eventually he'd hole up somewhere that conventional forces couldn't touch. So I prepared for this exact scenario. Torres glanced at his watch. 25 minutes until the wind shifts. You can stay and watch if you want, but don't interfere. Walsh faced a difficult decision. Her orders were clear, capture or eliminate Nasir with no civilian casualties. Torres's plan violated every rule of engagement she had sworn to follow. But time was running out, and conventional methods had failed.
If you miss, she said finally, if you hit a civilian, I'll have to take you down. Torres nodded grimly. Understood. But, Commander, I don't miss.
The sun continued to set as the two groups waited on the ridge, the Navy SEALs bound by their rules and orders, and the old ranger who had chosen to operate outside any system except his own sense of justice. In 25 minutes, they would discover whether sometimes the most dangerous missions require the most dangerous men. The wind shifted exactly as Torres had predicted. Commander Walsh felt it on her face, a subtle change in direction that her instruments confirmed. The old ranger had been studying this valley like a scientist, and his meteorological predictions were proving accurate to the minute. Wind shift confirmed, Morrison whispered, more to himself than anyone else.
He was fascinated despite himself by Torres's preparation.
In all his years as a SEAL sniper, he had never seen such meticulous planning for a single shot.
Torres was completely motionless behind his rifle, his breathing controlled and steady.
Through her binoculars, Walsh could see the compound clearly. Khalil Nasir was visible through the main window, apparently in a meeting with several other men. The children who had been playing in the courtyard all day were still there, now helping their mothers prepare an evening meal. Target is stationary, Chan reported quietly.
But, those kids.
I see them, Torres replied without moving his eye from the scope.
They'll be fine. Walsh checked her watch. According to Torres's calculations, they were now in the optimal window.
The wind was steady from the south, the temperature had stabilized as the sun set, and atmospheric conditions were as perfect as they were likely to get.
Sergeant Major, she said quietly, are you absolutely certain about this shot? Torres's response came without hesitation. I've run the calculations over 1,000 times. The bullet will travel in a slight arc due to the distance.
It will pass 12 feet above the children and 8 feet to the right of the woman cooking near the window.
Impact will be clean through the target's upper chest.
Morrison was studying the same shot through his own scope. Sir, even if your calculations are perfect, at this distance, any tiny variation could.
Could what, son? Could miss? Torres finally looked up from his rifle. Let me tell you something about impossible shots.
I once put a round through a playing card at 1,500 meters in a sandstorm.
I've hit targets while hanging upside down from a helicopter.
I've made shots that physics says shouldn't work. He returned to his scope.
But, this isn't about showing off.
This is about justice for my boy and preventing whatever attack Nasir has planned. Walsh's radio crackled to life.
Bravo team, this is command. We've intercepted new intelligence. The attack is happening tonight. Whatever Nasir is planning, it's imminent.
The pressure was mounting. Walsh knew that by the book, she should stop Torres. His methods violated every protocol she had sworn to uphold. But, conventional methods had failed, and time had run out.
2 minutes remaining in the optimal window, Torres announced.
After that, wind patterns change and the shot becomes significantly more difficult. Through her binoculars, Walsh watched the scene at the compound. Nasir was gesturing animatedly to the men around him, apparently giving final instructions.
Whatever operation he was planning, it was clearly about to begin.
I have a clear sight picture, Torres reported.
Target is centered. All variables accounted for.
Chen was also watching through his scope.
Civilian positions unchanged. This is as good as it's going to get.
Walsh made her decision. She didn't give Torres permission that would have violated her orders. But, she didn't stop him either. Torres took a deep breath and began his final preparations. His finger moved to the trigger as he made microscopic adjustments to his aim. The shot he was about to attempt was beyond anything taught in any sniper school.
It required not just skill, but an almost supernatural understanding of ballistics and environmental factors. On target, Torres whispered. Send it.
The rifle erupted with a sound that echoed across the valley. Walsh immediately focused her binoculars on the compound, her heart racing as she waited to see the result.
For what felt like an eternity, nothing seemed to happen. Then, she saw it. Khalil Nasir stumbled backward from the window, a look of shock on his face before he collapsed. The bullet had found its mark exactly as Torres had calculated. The reaction from the civilians was immediate but not panicked. They clearly heard the gunshot but had no idea where it came from or what had happened. The children continued playing, unaware that a bullet had passed safely over their heads just moments earlier. "Target down," Walsh reported into her radio, her voice barely concealing her amazement. "Repeat, target is down." Morrison was studying the compound through his scope. "Clean hit. No civilian casualties. How is that even possible?" Torres was already packing up his equipment with the efficiency of someone who had done this countless times. "Mathematics, son. And a lot of practice." The compound was beginning to show signs of confusion as Nasir's men realized their leader was down. Several armed figures were moving around frantically, trying to understand what had happened. "We need to move," Walsh decided. "They'll be looking for the shooter soon." Torres shouldered his rifle and prepared to leave. "They'll look, but they won't find anything. I've been doing this a long time." As they prepared to evacuate the ridge, Walsh's radio came alive with chatter from the intelligence community. The attack Nasir had been planning was indeed scheduled for that night, a coordinated bombing of 3 American embassies in the region. His death had disrupted the entire operation. "Hundreds of lives saved," Morrison said quietly as they began their descent from the ridge. Torres paused in his packing. "It won't bring my son back. But maybe some other fathers won't have to get that knock on their door." The trek back down the ridge was conducted in relative silence. Walsh found herself grappling with what had just happened. By every rule and regulation she knew, Torres's action was unauthorized and potentially criminal. But the results spoke for themselves: a high-value target eliminated with no collateral damage, and a major terrorist attack prevented. As they reached the valley floor, Torres stopped and turned to the SEAL team. "This is where we part ways, Commander. You have your report to file, and I have other business to attend to. What will you do now?" Walsh asked. Torres smiled grimly. "There are other bad guys out there. Other fathers who deserve justice. The system you work for is good, but it has limits. Sometimes you need someone willing to operate outside those limits." Chen spoke up. "Sir, that was the most incredible shot I've ever witnessed. How did you know it would work?" Torres considered the question. "You know what the difference is between a good sniper and a great one? A good sniper takes the shots he knows he can make. A great sniper makes the shots that need to be made." He began walking away into the darkness, then paused and called back. "Tell your superiors that Khalil Nasir is dead and his attack has been prevented. How it happened is up to you to explain." Walsh watched him disappear into the night, knowing she would probably never see him again. In her report, she would credit the successful elimination of the target to precision long-range engagement by authorized personnel. She would not mention Torres by name or detail his methods. Some secrets were worth keeping. 3 hours later, confirmation came that the planned embassy attacks had been called off. Communications intercepts revealed that Nasir's network was in complete disarray following their leader's unexpected death. The mission was a complete success. But Walsh couldn't shake the image of the old ranger disappearing into the darkness. Somewhere out there, Torres was already planning his next impossible shot, pursuing his own form of justice outside any official chain of command. The Navy SEALs had failed to complete their mission using conventional methods. But sometimes, when the system reaches its limits, it takes someone who operates outside that system to get the job done. Someone who doesn't worry about rules of engagement or official authorization. Someone who understands that sometimes the most important missions are the ones that never officially happened. In the years that followed, there would be other reports of impossible shots taken in impossible circumstances. Terrorist leaders eliminated in situations where conventional forces couldn't operate. Drug cartel bosses taken down by sniper fire from positions that shouldn't have allowed such shots. The reports were always vague, the shooter never identified. But those who knew about David Torres and
What happened on that ridge in the desert understood that some missions require someone willing to work alone, outside the system, bound only by his own sense of justice. The elite had failed. But, sometimes, it takes someone who operates beyond elite to succeed where others cannot.